Hello, sparkly beans! If you're new here, hi, my name is Avery, and I help justice-aligned, neurodivergent, and nerdy humans to cultivate ease and self-trust for growing into our emerging future. And today, I have a review of a deck that I think really helps to do just that. But before we get started, if you are not new here, I just want to say, yes, hi, I'm back. I know it's been a little while. Thank you for your patience. If you've checked the community tab or if you subscribe to my newsletter, which you can do below, or just go to queermagical.com. That's how you will know if I disappear what's going on. If you have checked either of those things, then you know that I unfortunately have had a pretty tough run of it with COVID, and I'm doing fine mentally, spiritually, but my body is definitely operating at a different speed than usual. My executive function has been pretty well shot, and so I actually got access to the community tab. They must have changed something so that the number of subscribers you need is lower, but I got access to the community tab, which is great. So I don't know if people even look at that, but like, just so you know, that's there. You can click on community on my channel if I disappear for a while and you're wondering what's up. But also just subscribe to the newsletter. That's really the best place. My lung capacity was such that I wasn't really able to make videos at all for a while. And fortunately, like I wasn't hospitalized or anything, but I definitely had a harder run than a lot of people with COVID, and am continuing to experience, I don't know yet if it's post-COVID syndrome, but experience stuff. So just wanted to give that update and let you know that I will be here, and I have a lot of things I want to do here on YouTube, and I am kind of feeling re-energized around that, but I also have limited breath capacity, so it means that the videos may not be particularly frequent for a little while, and I, hopefully that's fine. You'll just stick around. They come out when they come out, and I'm also, going to be starting to get back into writing when I can, but giving myself a lot of space and a lot of grace. But I thought that actually was not terrible matchup with this deck that we're reviewing today. So I wanted to get this out this week because the deck is coming out. It's the Cantigee Oracle from Laura Zuspun and Ray Diamond, put out by the lovely folks at North Atlantic Books, who did send me a copy for an honest review. Full disclosure, I'm gonna, of course, give my unbiased review of this deck, but I will say I really appreciated some of the titles from North Atlantic that have come out recently. Like, I've had pretty good luck with them as a publisher. I don't always notice, like, publishers or like notice a particular consistency of titles from a publisher, but I have found that they're doing some really good stuff, especially in the kind of healing justice space that I'm so interested in. And this is no exception. I hope that they'll continue to do decks. I will say, you probably didn't click on this, deck review unless you are an Oracle deck person or tarot deck person already. But just in case, keep watching, even if you're not, because one thing that's kind of unique about this deck is all the different ways you can use it, and it is a really interesting tool for practice. So I just want to say that up front before I get into it, that you do not have to be an Oracle deck reader to read with this one. So let me start by just giving some of my initial impressions. This is a really special deck. This is probably the closest thing I've found to like an emergent strategy practice deck. Even though they don't reference emergent strategy or Adrienne Maree Brown's work anywhere in here. And I don't know if either of the creators were influenced at all by her or by emergent strategy. But emergent strategy is also something that, as Adrienne points out in the book, right, is not something she invented. Like, she put structure and words to it and a system to it and has done amazing work around it. But it is really a practice that evolves in a lot of different ways. And so, it's possible that they don't have a relationship specifically to that term or that way of thinking, but it is very much a deck you could use in that context. And I love that because I'm an emergent strategist. A lot of my business, but also my personal practice, is very rooted in emergent strategy, which if you're not familiar, you know, there's many things you could say about emergent strategy, but one of the core things about emergent strategy is really starting at the scale of where you are and the ways in which being in the present moment, being in your own personal context, can have, and in fact is the only thing that ever can have, global and collective impact. So it's, you know, it's justice, but it's justice at starting from the scale, and it's very intertwined with healing justice. And so that's sort of, if that's something you're already into, like this is a really great deck for that. Also, just in general, I think it's a really supportive deck for those who are engaged in any kind of healing justice practice, who are trying to, you know, repair and relationship with and reconnect to nature, to the land, and with the self as well. So coming home to yourself, returning to a sense of belonging with yourself. So it has a lot of resonance there. And it is not, and I actually don't know like the racial, ethnic, etc. like identity. I don't know any of the identities really, because I just looked at what's in the guidebook of these two folks who created the deck. And so, like, I want to be clear that it's not an indigenous wisdom deck specifically, because I don't think either of these folks are native, and if they are, then great. But that said, it does acknowledge in the guidebook indigenous wisdom, and it does acknowledge like, land stewardship. And I, you know, I'm not like giving cookies there, but I just want to say like I think that's that might be important for some folks. I know it is important for me that in a deck that I think is very resonant with indigenous wisdom, that like the authors are aware of that. So I'll just note that. And pardon, I'll be looking to the side for notes, just because executive function, I can't keep everything in my head right now. But yeah, so what's particularly cool about this deck, like structurally and practice-wise, is that there are these different overlapping ways to use it. Like, even though I know a lot of Oracle decks have like different suggestions, you know, you could use it this way, you could use it this way. This one, it's really baked into the guidebook. It's really baked into the deck itself, particularly into the guidebook. And so, like, it can serve people who might only want to use it in a particular way, or somebody like me who's interested in all different ways. So, for example, if you're an artist or you're a creator, if you're a writer, if you do anything creative, and you're looking for like a creative prompt deck, this deck could totally serve as that, or just that, like if that's all you wanted to use it for. It could totally serve as folks who are trying to like build an awareness practice, like a personal like awareness practice, mindfulness, or it could work great for that. It could be a journaling prompt deck, because every section has at least some questions in it you could use for journaling. It can, of course, be used like a lot of Oracle decks to pull cards, seeking wisdom. I'll have some notes on like what kinds of pulls I think it would be good for, but like certainly can be used as an Oracle deck in that way. It can also specifically, and I think any Oracle deck can be used for this, but there's specific guidance. So each of these things I'm talking about, like there are actually specific sections we'll get into in each card that let you use it this way. So like another way is if you want to use these as like altar cards or reminders, you know, something that you put up visually to like pull yourself back to something you're working on. That's something that's specifically called out. And you could actually use it if you want to as a structured practice, where you're doing a card a week, because it's 52 cards and they are actually arranged in such a way that you could do it as a year-long practice. So if that's something that's more like structured for you, if you like the idea of like going through week by week, you know, I know I have a lot of Oracle decks, right? I have a lot of tarot decks, and sometimes like having a practice or like spending a season or even spending a whole year with like a specific deck would help me to like get to really know the progression of the deck, the structure of the deck. So like that would be a great way to get to know this deck, or just to be the way you use it. So lots of options, like we'll get more into each of them, but I really appreciate that. And I also really appreciate that the book, I think, could be really good for newbies, people who are new to using cards. I think it can give you a good start for a couple reasons that I'll go into. So that's my sort of overall like initial impressions of the deck. So let's get into, I'm going to start with kind of some of like what the deck's about and some of the kind of intro opening material in the book. So let's just start with the name, the Cantigee Oracle. Like, is that a specific thing? Is that a specific philosophy? So it's actually a name derived particularly for this deck from two roots. So Cantigee, you might like some if you're familiar with any Romance languages or Latin direct, you might even know in English words like canto or chanteuse. You might recognize that root is related to singing, is related to song, and then "gie," the suffix "gie," which I think is the same suffix as like apogee and some other words. It might be Cantigee. I just realized it might be Cantigee. I'm not totally sure how you would pronounce this because it isn't like as far as I know, it's not a word separately. I'm gonna like double check this. Cantigee word, maybe, because the way they explain it, it seems like they made it up, but it occurs to me, maybe they didn't. Yeah, no, I think they did, because it's only coming up related to this deck. So, I was like, double check. But yeah, so it might be Cantigee. I would have to like hear an interview with them or something to know. But that suffix is earth, is related to earth. And so they say in the book, Cantigee, I'm just going to say Cantigee, I don't know if that's right, but we're just going to go with it, is a song the earth sings, a spell it weaves, an enchantment it emanates. This deck, this book, and all of the archetypes within them are prayers of gratitude, healing, and awakening. So it's really a deck that is about resonance with the earth and resonance with nature. And it goes on to kind of talk about that, talk about listening to the song of the earth and letting that inspire us and transform both us and the planet. So I thought that resonance sense was really important. So the deck, the deck is a collaboration between two people, as decks often are. The writer, Ray Diamond, there's a really cute little like phrasing that they use to describe themselves. I'm not sure Ray's pronouns, so I'm just going with they. Because they're the author, they don't refer to their own pronouns. Laura's a she, but Ray, just says, I see myself as a studious fool on the hill. I love that. I like really resonated with that. But they're both artists, they're both teachers, they're both nature inspired, they're both inspired by Buddhism specifically. But Ray is a writer, poet, storyteller, and then Laura, you may recognize if you have the Luminous Void tarot. I got that right, yeah? Luminous Void. Yeah, I was like, had a moment of, is that right? It's the one, if you've seen, I don't have it so I can't show you, but it's the one that's kind of pill shaped and it has those watercolors and it's kind of like rainbow, like color palette, but it's watercolors and like little pills. If you've seen it, like it's very distinctive. So that's Laura. And you know, the two of them, like, it tells it a little bit about their story. It had this very like synchronous sort of random meeting, and I think there's really like a magic in this partnership between these two creators working very closely, and so that's kind of cool. You know, the deck was primarily inspired by nature observation, just throughout life, but Ray also notes, you know, themes inspired by concepts and techniques from Buddhism, Taoism, yoga, animism, the arts, and science. So, you know, those are some of the inspirations of the deck. It's not specifically like a permaculture deck or a Buddhist deck. Like it's weaving in different ideas. They note some of the philosophies that are underlying the deck, and this is part of where like I'm really feeling some emergent strategy in this. I'll even like read, so it's a little bit about sort of like individual impact. The steps available to us as individuals may seem trivial in the face of the grave environmental danger we're now in. But each conscious step we take is also a form of energy moving in a healing direction. Energy, like water, ripples outward, and it condenses and builds like a wave. Over time, waves erode stone, and under certain conditions, waves can become big enough to create immediate radical change. I find that this deck feels to me like it is very much in a radical tradition. Like there are certainly things, you know, about it that are like, I don't know. I mean, they're particularly in some of the, like the ecological material, like you see stuff that's fairly mainstream, sort of like take care of the planet, but it definitely has a feeling of that like radical spiritual tradition and connection to justice and liberation and all these things, even if that's not always explicit. Like I really feel it in the deck. I think that, yeah, that, I'm losing my train of thought. But yeah, so that definitely feels present to me. Like some of the other philosophies, you know, it notes about like, kind of a connection between awareness, care, and creativity, or some of the things that this deck is really like inspiring you to focus on. They write about practice and embodied practice as being important, and like using this deck as a way to kind of practice skills that we need. All of this to me is like really feeling like, that was the thought I just dropped, is feeling very like specific to this moment and to this like hunger that a lot of folks are feeling to reconnect and to heal, and also to like be like, holy shit, like this is, you know, like this is a big important moment. It's a moment of transition. It's incredibly scary for a lot of folks, and it's the result of like many cycles of oppression, and it's the potential of many cycles of liberation. Like I feel that in here. They also write about cycles and how the deck is very cyclical and very like related to natural cycles. They write about generosity and like cultivating an attitude of generosity. Something that I think tarot and oracle people will appreciate who are in a sort of similar like philosophy to it that I am. Of there is no bad tarot card. Like if you're there is no bad tarot card kind of person. I appreciate that there's a whole section about how kind of like binaries are not helpful and good bad is not helpful, and there's no good or bad archetypes in the deck. You know, nothing is going wrong and nothing is going right. Things are simply unfolding. But it's not bypassing. Like it's not everything is positive. Like so it's like both, there are no good and there are no bad. Like it's not there's nothing bad, but like also there's not, you know, everything is just is. Everything is. And there's a real like present moment feeling to it. And then as far as, you know, so let's see, let me just like regroup my brain. Yeah, so I mentioned that there's like a natural cycles. The deck itself is structured in a cyclical way, and it has sort of like, there's waxing cards or like building cards, and there's more like waning cards, as well as two cards that are pivots between those two things. And it's arranged so that you can follow the deck as if it's like with the seasons of the year, and also with the lunar cycle. So both of those are sort of noted in the content about the structure of the deck. And so if you're working either with a seasonal practice or like getting more connected to a seasonal practice or a lunar practice, this deck could work really well. There's a really sweet little metaphor of a bird in the description. So like there's a section called Flying a Little Closer where they go through groups of cards, because it's like I said, you have, you know, half and half and then the pivots, but then within each it's kind of 3 archetypes or 4 archetypes, it varies, I think, 3 to 4 archetypes correlating to like specific phases of growth and phases of evolution. And so they track that with the like kind of a story of how a baby bird goes through the life cycle. And so I think for nerd, like I think this could be a really good deck for neurodivergent folks for a lot of reasons, and one of them is this, like if you ground into metaphor and associations, like I think this could help you if you want to understand the structure. Although, like a lot of oracle decks, I don't think you really have to like really get the structure. It's very accessible to like just dive right in, and I'm gonna go into a couple particular cards, and that's what I did. I did not read this book first. I pulled a card first, and then flip to the page. So you can absolutely do that, but if you want to understand the structure, I did think that was kind of cool, the little like story of the bird to help you get to know it. So then, oh yeah, and then I mentioned that I really liked for beginners. So there's a couple things I really liked in the opening sections. And they have the standard stuff about like, clearing your deck and like different ways you can draw, like different ways of pulling a card, etc. But I really liked, there's a section on asking the right question. So it's definitely like a non-predictive approach, which makes sense as an oracle deck, and it's also not an oracle deck that would really like make a lot of sense in terms of prediction. But I think these questions could actually work really well for other decks too. And they really feel like familiar to me as somebody who practiced like, Soul Tarot with Lindsay Mack, who is an intuitive reader. I think intuitive readers are going to like really, like these questions. So, for example, there's one that says, ask how you might support a graceful unfolding of your situation. So ask how you might support a graceful unfolding of your situation. And then it notes, the future is infinitely malleable and out of reach. Our influence and work is in the present, and it is our thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and actions right here and now that shape our future. Let the oracle guide you in the present so that you yourself build towards an aligned future. So there's a lot of language in this book about like co-creation and resonance and like partnering with the deck and with the earth, and like there's layers of this, right? And so I just really appreciated that, because I think like a beginner coming to this is gonna get, and there's probably 10 different things you might ask. Ask how to support the greatest good of all in your situation. Ask for clarity about the roots and causes. So there's various ways you can pull questions, but I thought that one in particular was pretty neat to include. And then I also there's a section on, it's called Caring Attendance. It really encourages you not just to focus on, the cards themselves and like the information, but to actually focus on your reaction and your relationship to the archetypes. And so they give you some notes, take note of whether you like, dislike, or feel neutral towards the archetypes in your spread. This is very much when I mentor folks in tarot. And by the way, if you're interested in Tarot Oracle, I do mentoring sessions. You can see the link to all my services below. But when I mentor folks, one of the things that often comes up, and that I think people will get their way too often intuitively, but then maybe question themselves in terms of is that should I be ignoring that? Is this distracting from the card itself? When they have a reaction to it, or when they feel like, this makes no fucking sense. I'm like, no, that's the medicine, right? This makes no fucking sense is actually the thing that often contains the medicine. And why does it make no fucking sense? Or I'm really mad at this card. So I love that they bring that in, and taking note of your resistance, and they write a little bit about resistance. And so there's just a lot in here that really grounds you in practices that some folks will be familiar with already, but if you're not, you don't already have a relationship to mindfulness, or relationship to some of these relationship with the self kinds of practices, it can be really useful. And one of the suggestions in this section also is to periodically take note of and adjust your breath as necessary. And so I like that they tried to pull a little bit of a somatic approach even into an oracle deck. So in terms of how you can use this deck, like I said, there's a bunch of different ways. And you can pick a single approach or not. You can pull the cards at random and use a number of these things. So you could be like, I'm going to pull a random creative prompt. I'm going to see, what's the journaling prompt, or I'm just going to pull a card. But you could also intentionally pull cards for, like I said, an altar card or something. If there's something you're working with that you really want to dig into, I think this could be really good for that. A particular phase of growth or evolution you're struggling with, you could find it in the book. And so it may be useful to if you're going to use it that way, it might be useful to kind of read the book cover to cover, or at least skim through it to know your options. But there is also a little section called Cantigee's Yearly Cycle. Sorry, I'm not actually showing you the pages of the book, I realize, but they're, it's a book. It's not like laid out in any particular. So this Cantigee's Yearly Cycle, what it does is it has a heading to remind you of like what section of the year things correspond to, and then each card has the keynotes for the card. And so if you were like looking for a card for a particular experience, you could thumb through this pretty easily to find the one you're looking for. Like I said, there's 52 cards. You can do it as a this week I will focus on this kind of thing. It's really up to you. And, I chose to just pull like I normally would to start out, to like get to know this deck a little bit for this review. And kind of spend some time with the card and with the guidebook section. Similar to, if you have the Wild Unknown archetypes deck, there's some similarities here. Like I think this one has it was very different artistically, and this has a much more, is a specific thing, a specific theme, right? A resonance with the earth song. Like it's got that theme to it. But similarly, like this is also an archetypes deck, and I'll show you some examples of the names of them, but they're very much archetypes. And similar to the Wild Unknown archetypes deck, it's really accessible to like jump into just one card and read that section on it right away. Like I said, I didn't read any of this other material until later. You don't really have to understand the structure, but understanding that progression might inform your overall approach to the deck, and so you have that option. So similar, like with the Wild Unknown, I started pulling, and then I kind of learned about the progression of the archetypes, and then that helped me to see, when I pull this one, its number, and this one's also numbered, its number like shows me where it is in the cycle, and so that tells me a little bit as well about where I am. So yeah, really similar that way. There are spreads, so if you want to do spreads, there are spreads provided. They're all like kind of nature based. So there's like a bio. I really like this one actually, bioregion map, where they give you a bunch of bioregions and like what the meaning would be of the card, and you can actually pick the ecosystems that resonate with your situation. So like, you're not going to use all, there's like 20 of them. You're not going to use them all probably in a spread, but you could say like, I want the desert, and I want the forest, and I want the caves. That's an interesting kind of like design your own spread approach. There's a skeleton spread, a tree spread, bridge between earth and sky. There's a note on doing one cards, and some other stuff, weather patterns, lunar context. One thing I really like is that they have elemental spreads, but there's several for different traditions. So there's a Western element spread that uses the 4 plus ether. There's a Taoist elements spread, which is, if you're not familiar, water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And then there is a Buddhist elements spread, earth, water, fire, air, or wind. So depending on your tradition, you can kind of pick which of those you want to use. That said, I will say that I personally would probably not tend to use this deck with more than one card, like max maybe 3, probably only 2. Like I think generally I would pull a card. There might be times when I want to kind of, with a particular situation, I want to get like 2 takes on it, or maybe like energy now and energy to work with. There might be ways I would do 2 or 3, but because each card is really robust, and I'll talk you through the sections, it's several pages of guidebook, I really felt like this was a good deck to like pull a card and just be with that card and that archetype and like work with it. But if you were doing something, and they even like have suggestions for like if you're doing creative prompts, for example, you could actually like pull 2 cards and like blend those creative prompts, and that would give its own like 3rd creative prompt, right? Or just like a regular like sort of divination reading where you're pulling a spread. Like I could see that working. I wouldn't like these are good spreads. It's hard for me to imagine having like 5 of these cards and trying to understand all of them, like work with all of them. I think it would take me an entire afternoon. So I'll just like make that note. So let's get into like the individual card sections, and I'm gonna show you some examples. So these are actually the first 3 cards that I pulled from the deck. And for context, I was pulling these at like the height of my COVID situation. I was feeling super sparkly, magical, intuitive. And I could barely breathe. I couldn't talk, for example. I couldn't get out. I like made my way, ambled over to where the deck was sitting on my floor, and I like lay down on the floor and pulled a card. That was where I was, right? Like, I knew this was coming up. I knew the release was coming. I wanted to do this review. I was like, I need to start working with this deck. I can't breathe. But I also knew, like, I think if it had been another deck, I would have said, whatever, it's not a big deal, right? Like, if it's a little bit late, like, totally understandable. But I had the feeling that actually this would be a good deck for me to work with, because I was feeling I'd been feeling very connected to nature, and then when I had COVID, and still, I can't get up the stairs, so I can't leave my basement. And the smoke level was so bad those couple weeks here that I couldn't open windows. So it was there's definitely a grief or a feeling of like, oh, I want to talk to my plant friends. So this deck was kind of like, well, I can't talk to my plant friends outside, but at least I can connect in this way. So that's where I was when I pulled these cards. And so the first card I pulled was number 22, the Luminous Brew. So that's the card image. And we'll go through I'll flip through and show you some cards. All these watercolors. They tend to be kind of like this, like they're representations. Like you can see like a person in a teacup. They're fairly abstract, in a way that I think your intuition can kind of grab things visually. So I opened up the book for this card, the first one I pulled. And so they're numbered, so you can find them pretty quickly. And so each one starts with a story. Here's like just a little, like there's the spread right of the pages. And it's several pages. So it starts with the story. Then it's going to give you some keynotes. So those are the ones I said they're also towards the beginning. You can see all the keynotes. So that's just a quick reminder of what the card's about. There's a symbology section. It's not like, I know people tend to like the visual, the description of the visual. It's not necessarily like this is what's on the card and this is that's not really here. That said, depending on the card, sometimes the symbology section kind of gives you a sense of that. Sometimes other sections give you a sense of that. And it's abstract enough that like I feel okay about it not being like, and this is why I included this icon, right? But the symbology kind of gives you like a starting point for kind of what is there, what this card is about. It goes a little richer than just the keynotes. And then there's a guidance section, and the guidance section really is going to give you a bigger theme and idea. I think this is going to be one of the most useful sections for if you're just pulling a card to see where you are, kind of thing. There's a section called As an Icon. So this is where I noted that specifically if you want to use it, if you want to use a card to put like in your space to remind you of something, it gives you a couple of specific suggestions for like, this is what this image could remind you of. Like you could use it for this as an icon. There's a section called As a Portal, and this is the one that I find is useful for journaling prompts, because they're basically like questions that can help you to receive the archetype. There's a practice section, and it's going to vary what kind of practice it is. Sometimes it's a more physical practice, sometimes it's a more like, look into your past and consider this kind of practice. Again, the creative prompts is a specific section, and then there's the ecological connection. I found at first I thought this could work as like a nature practice deck if it was like I'm trying to build a practice with nature and I could flip to that section. It's not so much that. It's more, so some of the cards it's going to be more like a more general kind of like thoughts, understanding, like things to consider about ecology. A lot of times it will be like, I don't even know how to describe it, but like, you know, like the kinds of like tips you'll get around conservation or like animals or what have you, of like, you know, you could reduce your carbon footprint by XYZ, which actually I didn't mention the back of the book. I found it kind of weird and random. Like, there's not a whole lot in the back of the book, but there's a guide to reducing your carbon footprint, and then like a guide to cultivating beneficial impact on your local ecosystem. There's nothing wrong. I mean, these are great knowledge. Just like some of this kind of feels like it's this really radical deck, and then it's like, here are some environment tips from the 90s. But it's not to say, I mean, these are really important things, right? So, I don't know. Also, just FYI, like, the back is kind of random. There's like flower essences. There's just a random paragraph. It's like, flower essences are great. And here are some places you can get flower essences. And then there is a recommended reading section that's pretty good, with a few books for different topics. And like short enough section that you're not like, oh my God, this bibliography. And then like some organizations you can support, environmental and indigenous rights. So like, I mean, it's fine, but it was just like, it's kind of random back of the book section. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. So those are the sections you get. And so for this card, I'm going to like just focus on some of what I saw when I opened this for the first time. So I'm going to actually read you the little story for this one. I'll hold that up. In a cauldron made of moss, hung over a fire that feeds itself on nothing fuel, these things simmer under the light of the moon. A star-kissed leaf, pollen gathered by a swarm of bees between hives, lichen from the apex of a mountain, moistened with a single drop of cave water fallen from a crystalline stalactite, a wish you cannot know until it is fulfilled. You drink this brew from a green acorn cap as ribbons of dawn pink the boughs. So in that example, and this is often true, actually, I should have said that in the story section you actually get like, here's what you're looking at often. So you should orient it like that, more or less. Although actually, speaking of which, so they don't really, I don't think at any point I didn't see anything about the orientation. You know, it is a circular deck. And I found that it varies based on what the image is, but because it's so abstract and watercolory, I did find that like the direction I pulled it, I would notice specific things in the watercolor before I kind of turn it upright to see the image upright. So I think you could do that. Well, I know you could do that. I did it. But yeah, so each of these little stories, these beautiful like pieces of creative writing that Ray did, it has a kind of slight, like not hero's journey, because I don't think it's literally a hero's journey, but it has that kind of vibe of like, here's what you encounter as you know, the story of like walking through. So you could absolutely, if you wanted to, just read each of those sections as a whole story, you know, of the things you encounter as you move through the natural world. So, you know, I think I would always probably read this section, even if I've read it before. I would probably always read that little story when I pull it, because I think it just, you know, it's like a heart connection. And the keynotes with this card are that your current experiences will later feed your future self. In the meantime, let your past nourish you. I think I cried when I pulled this, because I was in the state, right, of like, ugh. So in one hand, it was just like, it just felt medicinal, right, the luminous brew. But also, it was powerful, like the symbology section, the strange and unforeseen adventures, synchronicities, and encounters that unfurl as you attempt the various feats of your life simmer within you. These experiences combine to form an elixir that nourishes and sustains you as future misadventures, switchbacks, and tragic comedies unfold throughout your life. So I think pulling this card and being in the place I was in, and like I was so like resonated with synchronicity, like I could feel, you know, I think I've been really leaning into that with my business, and I've been really finding that like those unpredictable sort of like pings are really guiding me. And I've always been really into like alchemy in a metaphorical sense of like transformation, of like blending and bringing things together, and I feel like that's a like neuroqueer and non-binary kind of superpower, and so that really resonated with me. And then the other thing that's really related to those things for me is like time travel and the ADHD experience of like, we're always experiencing multiple contexts and multiple times and places at once, and sometimes we seem scattered because it's like there's so much going on. But and so I love that the guidance section says this is a time traveling archetype, and so it actually like gives you you know, ideas about the past and then ideas about the future, and some little suggestions about, you know, like recall a time and place where you felt safe and at ease. And so being in this very serious illness, I think I pulled this and it was like, right, this is not, you know, I can still access moments of wellness while I'm in this moment of illness. No, that was really beautiful. The guidance section is longer, so I'm not going to read it verbatim, but that's what it talks about. As an icon, this card, let this image remind you of past experiences that can inspire and inform your current situation, and use this image to capture the essence of this time for future use. And then as a portal, let these inquiries open you, it always says, let these inquiries open you to receiving the gifts of the archetype. So as a portal questions for this one, what if everything you have thus far experienced gives you the very nourishment you need to resolve your current difficulties? That was the one I think that made me cry, because it was so weird. It was this experience of like getting this illness, and I've been locked down for a long time, right? I'm not going to do, like, I actually recorded a whole video about COVID. Like, I tried to like come back and talk. It was the most rambling thing. Like, I could not structure a story to save my life, and it would probably never see the light of day. It's like an hour plus long. But so suffice it to say, I'm not going to even tell you the whole story. But you know, I've been locked down for a long time, and I haven't been like terrified of COVID or anything. But I think like to some extent my partners have been, and I have certainly been, you know, generally cautious. And so getting it, like the one time I went to a group event, like in 3 years, you know, there's such a story I could have told of that, of like, you know, oh, look at you, you have terrible luck, nothing ever goes right for you, blah, 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 you know, like, could have easily spun out, mentally. I could have been in a why me state, you know, but I wasn't. I actually felt very serene about it. It was like one of the most embodied experiences I've had so far in this journey I'm on, of just embodying, like, accepting what I can't control and allowing things to unfold. And so I think getting this was just an affirmation of like, right, all the stuff that I've been through up to this point is influencing the way I'm experiencing this moment, and nourishing my current difficulties, as it says. And then the second question, the future, kind of dealing with the future side, is what if everything you're experiencing now will one day give you the nourishment you most need? And there's a practice where they actually like suggest you create and drink a luminous brew, so they give you some instructions for that. Making a lunar infusion on a full moon. There's creative prompts, like 3 different ones. One of them is create a piece of work that expresses poison as an elixir. One of them is to extract elements from a past work and create a new work that brews together these various pieces into a new potion. And then there's another, like creating work fragments that you haven't actually woven together, but just like trying to express different essences of your current experience with work fragments that you don't know where they're going yet. The ecological connection, I actually did do this, like suggest kind of learning about the natural history of where you live. Well, I didn't do the natural history exactly, but I did revisit for myself. One of the other things in here is, you know, indigenous populations. Like, I did revisit, learn a little more about the place where I live, which was a resource gathering place, which I didn't know, but it was I think it was the Susquehanna peoples, who technically it was the peoples whose land it was, but it was all different nations in the area were like invited to share this place and to gather resources at this place, and so like I learned a little bit more about that. So that was this card, and I'll quickly just share a couple other the cards I pulled. So I pulled this one next, I think the next day. Card 20. No, they're not very clear, but there are insects on this card, so like cover your eyes if that's a trigger. There are a few cards in this deck that have insects. FYI, I know that's a problem for some people. So this one, your heart in sync with cricket song. That's card 22. So I pulled that, and card 20. Card 20. The last one was card 22. This is card 20. So I'm not going to go through these second two in as much depth, but this one is all about resonance, and it notes that like this archetype is a big yes. What I really liked about this one that I noticed was, so there's various suggestions around resonance, listening to your heartbeat, conscious walking. But what I really appreciated was that there's an acknowledgement. Because I think a lot of times when you have a card that's like, this is a big yes, you might be like, oh, I'm not feeling that way. Like, how do I? And so it says like there are times when there's neither a feeling of resonance, nor of dissonance, but simply a lack of connection. And so they talk about like if you're drawn to this archetype when you're deeply longing for something, like what you can do in that case. So I like that it kind of acknowledges like different places you might be at. And let's see. Yeah. And then, so your heart in sync with cricket song. That one's kind of all about like resonance. Talks about crickets. So there, a lot of times there's like stuff about the specific like animals or plants or whatever is depicted. Then this one I really like. So this one is a little more, the last two, are kind of like more white space. This one's a little more filled in. They vary. This is archetype 37, a fork in the river. And I actually pulled it this way. And so this is an example of where the gold really stood out to me when it was going straight up. And it felt like there was a like reference to spirit when I pulled it that way. The kind of like idea of this like luminousness going upward. So the fork in the river, it's choice card, it's a related choice. And this was another one that I liked because it acknowledged that you might not be feeling. So I pulled this and I was like, there's not like a particular choice that I'm facing right now. It does generally reference intuition, and like I could connect to that, but there was an acknowledgement of that in here somewhere. Well, I know there is. I just don't know where. Well, it does have. So like this is a lot. Like you can pull a single card, and often it will key into a particular kind of spiritual practice. So this one really like is helpful for, if you're not used to like. Tuning into your intuition and like what is your heart saying about a particular thing, then they give you some guidance there. I could have sworn that there was a thing in here about, now I can't find it. Sorry, my executive function is impaired to the extent that it may be right there and I can't see it. Oh well, I guess I'll just live with the fact that I can't find the thing I'm looking for. Because I'm pretty sure there's something in here that's like, if you don't know what the choice is, or there's not an obvious. Oh well, can't find it. I believe it's there. Awkward. Well, it's fine. But yeah, so like the practice here is really like a body practice to try to feel out different options. And then there's like a whole page of creative prompts, so it kind of varies from thing to thing as well. So those are some of the cards that I pulled. Overall, like the sections are always the same, but like I just showed, it might be, some of them have like a ton of creative prompts, other ones might have like a lot in the ecological section. Again, like I didn't find the ecological section in some cases as helpful as other sections, but it's like nature and ecology are throughout everything. Some of them are more practical, like there's one that says visit a wildlife sanctuary, and kind of like observing your feelings, and it's like if you want to, you could volunteer. So some of them are bigger ideas, bigger practices. So yeah, let's transition to just like looking at some more of the cards, and like the deck itself as a physical object. So I'll just quickly show you it's a 2-part box. It's a glossy. It's one of these bigger boxes, but because of the size of the cards, I'm okay with that. Like I like the Other Known Archetypes has like the round box. I do like that, but it fits pretty tightly there. And because the guidebook is so necessary for this deck, like I can't imagine using this deck. I'm sure you could, but I can't imagine using it without the guidebook. I don't think I would be able to really like remember all the meanings until I've been working with it for years and years. So this is like tight to the book size. So I think that the box is good for what it is. And then the book is, you can see, nice little chunky book, paperback, and then the cards. So this is the back. I love these backs because they have this like is it holographic, like the shiny they have the shiny silver, and I can't get it to do it in the camera very well, but it looks very different. This like cobweb thing, it looks very different depending on how the light is hitting. So sometimes, I'm not sure if this is going to be evident because I can't get it, but sometimes it looks like it looks convex. It looks like it's like you're going down a hole kind of thing. And sometimes it looks more flat. It's just, I don't know. I love these card backs. I don't normally care about card backs, honestly, but I really like these. So you can tell they're pretty high gloss cards. They're round. My hands are like on the longer fingered side, so that gives you a sense of the size. And then the images, so they do tend to be fairly representational, but they are watercolor. And the titles, the archetypal titles, like this is why I think I would have to really know the deck to like be able to do it without the guidebook, because be like, what does the moss cauldron mean? I don't know. Some of them though, like a charmed leap. I love that. So some of them are like this, they have a lot of white space. Others, warning bees. Swarm of bees. Licking dew from green leaves. So they're very poetic archetypes. Voice of the moon. Won't go through all of them, but I'm just like, So you can see a primary nourishment. Here's an example of like some of them more saturated and have like a ton of color. I like that like you have some of these are borderless, so like you are seen. Oh, you are seen. Love that. Soil filling up the bottom. Or like kissed by whale spray. Ha! So I just like some of these make me really happy. Oh gosh. In the garden, warning, teeth. In the garden of lost teeth. Right? Fascinating archetypes. Like here's one that's like full color, full of color throughout. The setting sun sings the song of the unmaking. So some of them are phrases like that. I mean, they're all, I guess it's not a phrase, that's still, well, no, that's a sentence. The setting sun sings, yeah, it's got a verb. So that's a sentence. Some of them are sentences, or like, you are a multitude. I think, I like these because like even without, so I don't know what the book says about this, but I could immediately put this on my altar, and I could think what I think about it being a multitude, right? The infinite web, some are more nouns like that. This is one of my favorite. All intelligent tentacles. It's an octopus. So yeah, so you got like earthy, you got watery archetypes, Jupiter, Caduceus. You've got sky things like the dark solstice sun. This is, I believe, one of the pivot cards. Pollination. Touching the star-kissed leaf. So yeah. Oh, they do not miss their seed pods. I've been working with dandelions, so that. So yeah, it's a good mix. And then so yeah, just to like do a little wrapping up, I would say that again, if you're looking for something to do bigger spreads with, or if you're looking for a deck that is like more immediately obvious and easy to memorize meanings, this is probably not the deck for you. It's also not like it's not one specific tradition. So if you're looking for like a Buddhism deck or a mindfulness deck, like you may want to get something that's more specific. But that said, I think this is going to resonate with a lot of people. I think anybody who's, looking for belonging, looking for a different relationship with self, relationship with the land, with the planet, with anyone living on the planet, this could be really supportive deck. It's easy to jump right in, like I said, but it's also if you're like a nerdy person and you want to learn the structure, that's there for you. In terms of like things, I would say this deck would pair really well with a lot of other decks. I don't have them here because I just don't have a physical spoon to like gather decks right now. But I will say that obviously it would go well with the Luminous Void Tarot by the same artist. But also, like, I think this would pair great with a lot of different place-specific decks. So, like, the Pacific Northwest Tarot immediately came to mind as one that I think would go really well with. Decks like the Gentle Tarot, I could see the Spacious Tarot would probably work pretty well with as well. Really, any watercolor deck, any, like, nature deck, any earthy deck could be a fit. I also could see this pairing really well with both the decks that connect to a more specific tradition. So, like, you could use this with a deck that's like a Buddhist deck, for example, or Taoist deck, or something that's like from your specific culture, background, or religion. But I could also see this pairing really well with like a seasonal deck or a lunar deck because of that structure. It might be interesting to like pull like say like a Moonology card or what's that one I just got? Where is it? I think it's called Sacred Cycles, maybe? Or like that one, Earthcraft. Yeah, so some of these like earthy decks I've gotten recently, I was thinking, oh, these would pair really well. Or with, if you have like a specific, so like a tree deck or a plant deck or a crystal deck, or even like a goddess deck. Like I could see like taking a more familiar like amethyst plus this archetype, or like a goddess plus this. I think that could be really interesting as well. Like for comparisons, I would say, like I said, it's similar. Like it's not similar exactly, but it's also a round archetype deck with progression. So like related in that way to the wild unknown archetypes. That said, I think they're very different in terms of the archetypes, and so I'm going to work with both. But if you that might be a comparison. Like if you've liked working with the wild unknown archetypes, I think this would be a good deck for you. It also reminds me a little bit of like the Lisa McLaughlin decks, and particularly the Life Design cards, which is like a permaculture deck. Maybe even the Land Sky Oracle, although I haven't really worked with that one yet, so I couldn't say. But yeah, those are some like maybe comparisons. So anyway, that's the Cantigee, however we say it, Cantigee, who knows, Oracle. If you have any questions about it, you can feel free to leave a comment and I'll answer if I can. But that it is out this week, so you can pick that up from your fine independent bookseller, or presumably directly from North Atlantic. And yeah, that's the deck. Let me know if there's particular decks that you would like to see reviewed on this channel that I have, or you're wondering if I might have. I'm happy to do that. Any of the decks that I just listed, for example, in the comparisons, I can do that. And otherwise, thank you for bearing with me while I've been out for a little bit. I'm going to go rest now that I've used all my lung capacity for the morning. And take care. And remember, I think this deck is a real reminder of this. Remember that your own self-trust is the most powerful compass that you have, and that you inherently have the capacity to resonate with this planet and with everyone else on it. You just got to clear away that capitalist bullshit. that colonizing bullshit, and come back to the heart. And I think this deck can really help you to do that. All right, stay well.